Hey, what's up, guys, and welcome back to another episode of Cops Court and Community. I'm Darnell, Eason, and today I have a special guest with me. I have attorney Michael E. Beer, who's going to talk to us a little bit about what he does on the other side of what I do with respect to law enforcement. So, Mike, if you don't mind, introduce yourself and tell everybody a little bit about yourself.
Thanks, Darnell. Good to be with you today. So I'm Michael Beer. I'm a lawyer. I've been practicing law for almost 28 years. I grew up in Long Island, Woodmere, and I still live there today. My 41st year living here in Woodmere in Long Island, and that's where my office is, here in Woodmere, Long Island. I went to local parochial schools out here in Long Island, Queens College, county major. Then I went to Touro Law School, which was at that point was in Huntington, New York. Now it's in Central Heights, up on the big court campus there, but it used to be in Huntington, and practiced for a couple of years in the construction industry until that industry died in the early 90s, and got laid off. And my wife's grandfather, may he rest in peace, was a traffic court judge. He was a traffic court supervising judge. He was the deputy director of the appeals board in Albany. So he made it up the chain of command of the DMV. And when I met my wife in 1991, he had already been retired for almost 8 years. And when I lost my job in 93, he said, come along, there's plenty of fish in the sea. Come cast your net and catch some fish with me.
Right.
And so since February of 93, I've been fighting tickets in New York City, Long Island, upstate, traveling as far as my car can take me and as far as my phone can reach to defend the drivers that are charged in New York, all over the place. Local courts in Long Island, Westchester, Rockland, Suffolk County, Nassau County courts, and mostly in the city, where it's a much different system, and we'll get to that part of our conversation.
Indeed.
But it was sort of I was dropped into this field.
Okay.
I'll tell you a funny story. When I was in law school, I graduated law school in 1991. And in 1990, I was driving to law school in Huntington, and I got stopped for a stop sign ticket. And I was a big shot. I went by myself to traffic court in Hauppauge. They used to have the same type of system as the city, a TVB, a traffic court. And I've since learned that a person who represents themselves has a fool as a client. But I represented myself, and I kicked some ass that day in traffic court in Hauppauge, and I won my case. And I guess 4 or 5 years later, when the opportunity came along, I knew the space, and I was ready to start working there right away. And it's been over 27 years, and I'm still doing it. So happy to continue.
Wow. That's a long stretch. Now you mentioned you were in the construction game. You were construction work, or you practiced?
No, I represented. It was a construction litigation firm that I worked for.
Okay.
So we would contract disputes, mechanic lien foreclosures. Big projects, small projects, golf course on Long Island. We worked on a hotel project a lot of litigation, big contractors, small contractors, all subcontractors, plumbing contractors, GCs, anything you can think of, we dealt with. And that industry died in the early 90s. It came back with a roar a couple of years later, but in the early 90s, there was a significant downturn in the city, and they let a lot of people go in the firm that I was with, and never didn't work. A week later, I was working with Grandpa and fighting tickets on the old Livingston Street court in Brooklyn.
All right. So that was really the only other area of law that you practiced. So for the majority of your career, it's been traffic court. I do occasionally handle real estate matters, like residential home purchases and things like that, as a side to the traffic. And I do things that relate to traffic. So like I don't do drunk driving, it's a little too complicated. New York used to be a state where they would make deals. Now New York litigates everything, and you've got a lot of new and more complicated issues in drunk driving, toxilizers, and they now make you install a device in your car if you have several convictions. So it's much more complicated than it used to be. Right. But I handle a lot of things that relate to driving, commercial trucking violations, driving while suspended. So basically anything that relates to the operation of a motor vehicle besides parking, cameras, or drunk driving. I handle almost everything else in criminal court that relates to driving a vehicle besides drunk driving and parking. Okay, so Long Island, Suffolk County, upstate, anywhere that
And
your
it's
car can take you.
100%. Yes.
That's where you go. So you're all over the map,
Right.
so to say. So how many hours do you think you actually are working in the actual court? How much time are you dedicating to
See,
fighting
so
in
so
court?
I would say that on an average day, I'm probably working about 8 to 10 hours, maybe even 12 hours a day. But it's sort of split. Half the day is in court, and half the day is in the office prepping for the next day, dealing with the new clients. Uh, so it's a lot. It's a 50-50 game. 50% of the time in court, 50% of the time in the office. Now, court could be in Manhattan one day, in Brooklyn another day, Queens another day. It's when I first started 27 years ago, there were 5 traffic courts in New York City. Now there are 8.
Okay.
So it's become a lot harder to be the runaround kind of guy. When I was a young fresh lawyer, I had more energy and more time, and also more ability to run around because the courts were much simpler. Now there's 8 of them. It's a lot harder to travel around. So we have a team that we work with. I have 2 lawyers that work with me pretty much all the time, named Josh Waxman and Jeff Levine. And then we have a team of other lawyers that we work with that cover things in places that we can't get to by ourselves on a daily basis. But we try to do a lot of the work ourselves and give our clients the best opportunity to be found not guilty when we go to traffic court.
Okay, so it's just really a group of you guys working together.
Sure.
Or you just farming out work, which is it?
So both. We have a group that works together, and we have a group that we farm out. Reciprocal relationships with other lawyers.
So if you couldn't get to, let's say, a court in Albany, you have somebody up in Albany that would handle that case for you, and then vice versa. Somebody in Albany might say, "Hey, Michael, I have something, down in, New York City that
you
can handle for me." Okay.
Exactly. And a lot of things have changed since COVID, and we'll get to that in a little bit. But there's been a lot of changes because of COVID.
Definitely got to ask about that. Definitely have to ask about that.
Sure.
So again, you're all over the place. 20 plus years. How many years you said? 28.
Almost 28 years.
Almost
right.
28 years. I'm sure you've seen it all. I'm sure you've heard it all. Tell the viewers about the most interesting case that you've ever handled.
So there's a lot of interesting cases, and it's hard to point out one. The most interesting ones are always the most challenging ones. The guy that's traveling 119 miles an hour in a 50 is obviously the most interesting because it's the most challenging and the most at stake for the client and for me. I have an ego and I want to win every case.
Right.
So even the guy that's traveling 119 miles an hour is still somebody that I want to try to do a good job for. Obviously, if I post on Facebook that I beat 119 mile an hour speed, most of the haters are going to say, "How did you get that guy off? That bad guy? Right. He's a menace to society. How can you do that?" But everybody's entitled to a defense.
Yes.
I always call that the OJ story, right? Everybody's entitled to a defense. I think we all felt in our hearts he was guilty, but he got a defense, right? So
indeed.
Same thing here. Even though the 119 mile an hour speeder is somebody that would ordinarily be looked down on, he's still entitled to a defense. Okay. I'll tell you the funniest thing I've encountered is in criminal court. Lawyers sit around a lot. It's a lot of sit around and wait in court, whether it's traffic court or criminal court, and you see a lot of things. And I recall the funniest thing I ever saw was in criminal court. Many years ago, there was a big push to in the city for quality of life to charge people with open alcohol in public.
Yes.
So if you ever see people drinking out of a paper bag, it's probably a beer or something. But if you have an open alcohol in public, it's a violation.
Yes.
And I remember being in criminal court in the Bronx, and this young fella steps up, and the judge says, "You're charged with open alcohol in public. What happened?" And he says, "Well, I'm an epileptic, and I had a closed bottle of beer in my hand. I had a seizure. I fell to the ground. The bottle fell out of my hand. It opened up and rolled to my lips. And when the officer came by, I just happened to have the bottle by my lips." And the judge said, "That's a great story. $5 fine." So
nice.
You see everything from all different extreme stories, and when you go to court, some crazy, some sad, other interesting cases. I had a woman many years ago who had a speeding ticket, and her excuse is that her daughter was suicidal. And she was called by the psychiatrist. "Your daughter is on the ledge of the building about to jump, and she will only speak with you. Come now." So my client rushed on her way to the scene of the incident, and she was stopped for speeding.
Okay.
And she told the officer, listen, my daughter, he said, well, here's a ticket, be on your way. And the next day, there was a picture of her in the paper leaning out the window, talking her daughter in off the ledge.
Wow.
So we brought in a copy of that cover of the newspaper and her explanation, and the judge found her not guilty on a justification that she had a good reason. She was speeding, but she had a good reason. So that was an interesting case, and I was able to help that woman because she wasn't doing the wrong thing.
Right.
And that cover of the New York Post or the Daily News, I forget what it was. It solidified her story, sure.
All right, well, so let's take a couple of steps back, because you mentioned this woman whose daughter was on the ledge, she was speeding, and you mentioned the 119 mile per hour speed case. Now, two things. One, is that 119 the fastest you've had?
That's the fastest I've heard, but not the fastest I've seen.
Okay. The second thing is, you mentioned that it's the most challenging summons to fight. Why is that?
Well, because firstly, speeding tickets, most of the officers that write speeding tickets, as you well know, are the most well-trained.
Yes.
And the most experienced. An average officer in a precinct or some other patrol duty is not necessarily going to be experienced to write speeding tickets. And the law requires that the person who writes a speeding ticket have some experience.
Yes.
So the officers that are writing the speeding tickets are the most experienced. And so they present the greatest challenge to me to try to overcome the case. Also, they're the most technical of almost any ticket that I encounter. A lot of elements that the officer has to prove, and so it's sort of a little bit of a cat and mouse game when I go on these cases, listening carefully, finding the holes, finding the errors, the mistakes, the discrepancies, and trying to rip those open and show the judge that the officer, while he's a careful observer, he's not, on this case, hasn't made out all the requirements that he has to make out. And so even on those 119 mile an hour cases, if the officer doesn't prove it by the prima facie elements that are required, and that's the buzzword, the prima facie, then the judge should really find them not guilty, despite their feeling that the person was traveling at 119 miles an hour and deserves to be guilty. They still have to follow the law.
Right, and that was going to be a follow up. What is that technical term, prima facie? I mentioned it, in another video. Right. And while I have you here, can you just tell the viewers what is prima facie?
Prima facie means like on its face. That's what it's a Latin word. A lot of legal terms like we hear in law are always Latin. It means on its face. It has to have it's the bare bones, the most simple, basic requirements to testify to a speeding case. So, for example, time, date, and location are always part of a prima facie element of any ticket, whether it's speeding, red light, stop sign, cell phone. Time, date, and location are some of the basic prima facie elements. And in speeding tickets, there's a lot more. There's testing the equipment, training, sign observations, and other issues that the officer has to testify about to prove that case. All that are these minutia, but prima facie elements to prove the case. And if a prima facie element is missing and it's important enough, the judge should find not guilty. And having done this for 28 years almost, my ear is tuned to listen for those prima facie elements. I don't need a checklist on a piece of paper. I got a checklist up here in the in the bean up here where I can find all those things and remember what's missing and point it out to the judge. But it's prima facie is obviously every judge has their own standard of what prima facie is. One judge may have a higher standard, one judge may have a lower standard. So that's another thing of having done this for 28 years. The judges that I appeared before, I know the idiosyncrasies of which judge has the higher standard, which judge has the lower standard, which judge is going to be more favorable to an argument that I might have made before versus less favorable, and tailor the argument to that judge's disposition.
Yeah, early on in my career, as I'm building up, my confidence level, in court, and really tailoring my testimony. I would win certain cases, but there was this one particular judge I would always lose. And I'm like, why am I winning with everyone else, but with this particular judge, I'm losing? And he was looking for one particular thing that I was not saying with him.
Right.
And once I figured it out, that was it.
Boom.
So
yeah, it's those buzzwords. If they're looking for those buzzwords.
Looking for it.
And sometimes they want to hear it in a specific way, in a specific order, at a specific time in the story. And if they don't hear it when they want to hear it, it doesn't fit their requirements. And other judges, they have a lower standard, less requirements to prove the case. I'm not saying it's a difference in the law. It's just a difference in the interpretation of the law and how they apply it to the facts.
Okay.
But go ahead.
But prima facie, how is traffic court different from a criminal case? Can someone apply the same thing to
prima facie, any law, whether it's murder, trespassing, or traffic tickets, every law that's enforced has a prima facie elements that have to be proven. But it's the standard of proof that differs in each court, in each different system. So people have heard beyond a reasonable doubt.
Yes.
That's the standard in criminal cases. You have to prove a case beyond a reasonable doubt. And that's sometimes people say that's like 90%. You have to be like 90 to 100% convinced in order to find somebody guilty in criminal court. Whereas in a civil case, like if you're suing somebody for an accident, it's only a preponderance. 51% is really the standard there. Wow, you don't 51? Have to prove 51, wow. more likely than not, right? You don't have to prove it beyond a reasonable doubt, but you can't have any, you can't, but it's preponderance of the evidence.
Wow.
More than likely. In traffic court in the city, where I spend most of my time, it's neither beyond a reasonable doubt or preponderance. It's called clear and convincing evidence. So it's somewhere between preponderance and beyond a reasonable doubt, but it's not either one. There's another place where clear and convincing evidence is used, and that is in family court, in child, when they want to terminate parental rights. That's the other place where it's used. So when I have a judge that's sort of looking at me askance when I start arguing clear and convincing evidence, I said, the only other place that I'm familiar where they use it is when they want to take away parental rights. So when you think about how important those rights are, and this is the same standard they're using here in traffic court. So even though it's not as low as preponderance and it's not as high as beyond a reasonable doubt, I always argue that it's pretty close to beyond a reasonable doubt, because if they're going to take away somebody's kids for the same standard, the traffic ticket should get the same standard. And like you said, some judges are high and some judges are low, but it's all a determination on where they feel this clear and convincing standard meets their view of the evidence.
Right. Do you find that some of those judges tend to like the officer more than an attorney? Not saying you, not saying myself or anything like that, right. But do you find that, I've heard, this officer testify, a few hundred times, and he may have forgotten something. I'm going to let it slide. I know what he's talking about. Do you find that in the courts?
I find that there is certainly some deference to the officers over the attorney and their client, or the pro se, the unrepresented person. I feel that many judges will give the officer a little bit of leeway in terms of the method of presentation. Obviously, if the officer is abusive to any of the parties, most of the judges will chastise them, so that doesn't fly. But in terms of getting a little bit of the benefit of the doubt, sometimes if there's a questionable call,
right,
and when you would think the tie goes to the runner, maybe it goes to the pitcher in this case in traffic court. But no animosity at all. That's not what we're looking for here. We know each other, as you said, from the other side of the bench, right?
Yes.
And so people could see that, even though I always liken it to that old cartoon. We're dating ourselves, Roadrunner and the Coyote, right? So that's how it is, right? It's right. We can beat each other up in the courtroom and go have a beer after, right? That's how it is over there. But some of the judges are a little more deferential to officers than others. There's no question about it. But again, it's not because they favor them for any reason. It's just that's I guess partially human nature. When you're seeing somebody with some frequency, they see an individual motorist once in a lifetime, I hope, for the motorist, but they're seeing this officer week in and week out. A lot of it becomes routine after a while.
Right.
Because the stories, as you know, are very much the same.
Yes, indeed.
It's the names and the vehicles that change, but the stories remain the same. So,
absolutely.
So it becomes very rote and routine sometimes.
Right. So something you just said, this motorist, the judge might see this motorist once in a lifetime. So in your almost 28 years, have you had repeat clients that say,
Oh,
hey,
yes. There are clients that I have that are repeat offenders on a monthly basis.
monthly.
Monthly. I have some
Oh
clients
my goodness.
with 10 to 15 pending tickets right now.
Wow.
My kids' tuition thanks them for their for their productivity.
Wow. 10 to 15 in a month.
Yes.
That's insane.
No, not a month. Then they get one a month, like
That's
over a
still all
year's
right. So
period.
they have 10 or 15 pending. That's a lot. And
That's a lot.
I don't think I've ever mentioned it, but I want the viewers to know, that when you get a summons from, any law enforcement officer, it's not to punish you. It really is to correct, an action. So if you're on your cell phone, you run a stop sign, you run a red light, yeah, those things are dangerous, but it's the corrective action that we're looking for. Here's the summons. Hopefully you don't do it again. So I just want to make that point very clear. So this particular client of yours, who again 10, summons is pending, maybe he's just not getting it, and that's my
always
hope when I write a summons. I hope I don't see you again. I hope that.
I tell people like that when they come to me like that fourth or fifth. I said, you need to start thinking about your habits, man, because I love you for coming to me with business, but I'd rather you learn the lesson and you refer new people to me as opposed to being the one that comes to coming back. Yeah, I didn't mention, but for about 4 or 5 years, I taught at John Jay College, the
Okay.
college where they teach law enforcement. And one of the things I taught there was a traffic control class, and I had a former traffic commissioner for the city of White Plains come in and give a lecture. Couldn't get Sam Schwartz, the famous
Yeah.
Sam, so I got
Relax,
this other
Sam.
Relax Sam. I couldn't get Sam, but I got his friend Bernie to come down, and Bernie said there's 3 E's in traffic control: enforcement, engineering, and education. And so you mentioned that enforcement, the purpose is really to educate in the end.
Yes.
But and what you're doing with your video, your vlog, is to educate people.
Yes. Absolutely. Absolutely.
And engineering is the third one, where the roadways need to be controlled properly so that controls traffic. So you're providing 2 of those 3 services to the
I
public.
try. I try, and I always tell everyone, if I help one person, then it was all worth it. So
Sure.
I'll keep doing what I'm doing. Again, I appreciate you taking the time to come here and sharing your side of things. It's very important that we get this information out there.
Sure.
It's like you said, it's education. So I'm going to continue to do my part.
Excellent.
So you have these repeat clients. Now, do you think that, well, let me ask you, are there any tips that, you can offer when it comes to selecting, a traffic court attorney? Or can I just go online, just Google, traffic court attorney and pick the first one that pops up? Should someone really do, a selection process? Should they, make a few phone calls? Because I did a video not many years ago, but a few years ago, how, to select, a traffic court attorney. And, that was just from my experiences and what I've
Right.
seen. But as the actual attorney, do you have any tips that someone could just use? Because honestly, I don't know your side of things. How do
All
you?
right. So I'll tell you. So like I said, 28 years almost, and I've seen a change in the method of how people find an attorney over those 28 years. When I first started, it was a lot of word of mouth. I had the old Yellow Pages advertising in the old days.
Oh, wow, dating yourself.
Dating myself again. Yellow Pages advertising was a big thing 20 years ago, and now it's totally internet based. People go to Google for everything, and I'm even finding from my own advertising that I'm focusing on mobile because people don't seem to be using desktop. They get a ticket. The first thing they do is they go on their phone and search for
Right.
a lawyer, and so mobile is really the way. That's where they're searching on a mobile device. But I think that a lot of my cases still come from referrals,
Okay.
whether it's from other attorneys or from other clients or from insurance brokers or other professionals in the industry. And I think that's the best way to find a reliable and trustworthy attorney, is by people who've dealt with them in the past. so
Right.
that it's not a anonymous communication, but with somebody that your friend or your colleague or your coworker has dealt with, and they can give you a firsthand referral to that lawyer. Obviously, Google ads and other sources are great, and I'm actually your viewers are about to get the first preview.
Go ahead.
I've just started a new website called Traffic Ticket Professor, and my green screen is going crazy back here.
It's okay.
But it's trafficticketprofessor.com. It's a new website. We're debuting it actually this week. It's a bit of a different style, a little bit of education. I have an ebook available on there.
Oh, nice.
And it's a filter website as opposed to a more traditional website where people can learn about me and about tickets and how and we can do a consultation. So that is a source. It's a great source and it's a big source. And the competition out there, as you said, you can go online and search for an attorney. You may get 20 or 30 choices. How do you pick from that 20 or 30 choices?
Right.
So I'll use myself as an example. I pride myself on several things. My long-term experience. I teach a lot of continuing education classes. So that's teaching the lawyers how to fight tickets or what's involved with tickets. I taught at John Jay College. I taught the students and the cops that work there. And one of the classes I taught was traffic control. I also taught criminal law and business law and other classes there. And a long time ago, the DMV used to have retreats where they would have the judges come and learn. And one of the things I did one year was I spoke to the judges. So I've trained the lawyers, I've trained the cops, and I've trained the judges. But when I first started in '91, there was an officer in Brooklyn Highway Patrol named Matty Smallman, and he was a prolific writer in Brooklyn. And he wrote the same guy in the same burgundy Lincoln Town Car 3 times in the same month. And his name was Mohammed. So the big joke was Mohammed cubed, got 3 tickets in the same cop at the same spot in a month. So people do that. It's not unusual.
Yeah.
And so at least that guy remembered, and he was cooperative. You posted a video of that DWI stop with my friend John Finley. I knew John very well.
Yeah.
And that guy was belligerent, and he suffered the consequences for his belligerence. But but it was that. So you're right. People need to learn from their mistakes, and that guy didn't learn from his mistake, but he learned how to react to his mistake, and I think that's equally important. Is if you react properly, it'll go a lot easier for you versus.
And that's something I said in a recent interview that I did. It's how you conduct yourself on a car stop that's really going to dictate how things go, and people just don't understand it. They go with what they see on TV and in the movies, and their emotions. They let all of that stuff take over, and it doesn't end well.
No.
Just again, I said it. You don't have to bow down. You don't have to, kiss the foot of the officer. But again, yes, officer, no officer. Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir. No, sir. No, ma'am. It goes a long way.
Sure.
But let me go back again with respect to the Googling for, attorneys and, trying to find the best possible representation, that you can get. What would be a downside of me going next door, seeing my neighbor who is a real estate, lawyer, or, someone who practiced, copyright law or something like that? What would be a downside of me going to them saying, hey, I got this speeding ticket, can you represent me?
Right. So unlike other professionals like doctors, lawyers don't have to go to special classes to have a specialty. And so I didn't go to special classes to become a traffic lawyer. I went to law school to become a lawyer. And I learned over the years of reading the law books and practicing and being in court every day, both the practical and the technical side of being a traffic lawyer.
Right.
I'm sure that after a lot of time and work, I could become a patent lawyer, or I could become a personal injury lawyer. But the first couple of 100 times that I do it, I'm probably going to make a mistake.
Right.
And so I liken that. I always, when a client comes to me and says they can do themselves, I said, well, that's interesting. I said, I was early to the dentist last week and he wasn't there. And I thought about sitting down in the chair and drilling myself. and maybe I could figure it out after a while. But the first couple of times that I start using that drill, I'm sure I'm going to mess it up.
All right.
So I'm sure that lawyer next door, who's a copyright lawyer, is a bright, articulate, and learned person. But I wouldn't profess to be able to practice copyright law. because I haven't done it. I don't know the rules. I don't know the practicalities and the technicalities. Likewise, I've been to court many times where a well-meaning lawyer comes in, is not experienced in the area, and doesn't know the process, doesn't know the technicalities. And so that's why I hope that lawyer has my number and they'll refer their client to me.
Yeah, nothing like a good referral. Yeah. Sure. So I recall a case where this lawyer came in and she was just grilling me, and the judge was like, "Counselor, enough. This is not a murder case. This is traffic court. Stop." You know, ultimately she lost, you know, but it's just like, wow, why are you here? You know, you knew nothing about why we were here, you know, but it is what it is.
Yeah.
But let me ask you this. Do you have, because I have a particular summons that I always will write every single time, no matter what, no matter who, you know, I'm going to write that. And that's that unrestrained child summons. That is a big pet peeve of mine.
Pet peeve, sure.
Do you have a particular summons that you like arguing in court? Like, oh, great.
Like we discussed. Right. So I got this would probably be like the lesser serious ones where there's less requirements, but more opportunity for gray areas, like a red light ticket. There's more opportunity for a gray area where you have perspective of green or yellow. The officer has a perspective of red. You can argue that. Tickets like stop signs or HOV lane tickets, where you come down that lane and you don't have the right number of passengers, or you don't have your easy pass. That's black and white. It's very hard to argue those tickets. Speeding tickets also have a gray area, but like I said earlier, speeding tickets are the ones that have the most technicalities. Gives me an opportunity, for lack of a better word, to perform, can show some of my magic on speeding tickets. Those are also the tickets that have the most case law. You're not going to see so much case law on a more basic ticket. I mean, right now in New York City, the most popular tickets that I'm encountering on the enforcement side are cell phone, portable electronic device, failure to yield right away to pedestrian, improper turns. Those are the things that de Blasio and the city are focusing on for the last couple of years. COVID has changed the dynamic, but that's the focus, and that's what we're seeing. When I first started 28 years ago, it was red lights. Then it became speeds. Now it's cell phones and portable electronic device, and those two other failure to yield right away and improper turn. So it's a mixed bag out there, and I enjoy the ones that have the most technical requirements, because that's where there's an opportunity to find holes. The less technical, either it's very black and white or it's very gray, and the ones that are black and white are the hardest ones to win.
Yeah, so all of those that you mentioned would be a part of New York City Mayor de Blasio's whole Vision Zero plan. That
initiative, right? Yeah.
Okay. So
yeah, those are the hot ones out there these days. Yep.
Okay, so let's fast forward to 2020 now, and everybody knows we've been dealing with this COVID-19 pandemic. How has traffic court changed?
Wow,
since COVID-19 has come into play.
We could do a whole hour just on that, but it's changed a lot. So New York City traffic court and most of the local courts, Long Island, where I spend a lot of my time, were closed beginning the second week of March until late July, early August. So almost 5 months they were closed, of no hearings, no activity at all. Now let's focus on New York City. Traffic court in New York City opened in July on a staggered basis, 2 courts each week until they opened all 8. And traffic court used to be an open building. Anybody can come and go as they pleased. Now you can only come into the building either on the traffic court side or on the license side if you have a scheduled appointment. So you can't just show up unannounced and expect to be able to walk into the building. You have to make an appointment online or have an appointment for a hearing to walk in. And then on the hearing side of traffic court in New York City, they've reduced the capacity of the hearings to just 25 to 35% of their regular capacity. So there's very, very few people in the building at any given time because they've reduced the capacity so low.
Okay.
The other major change is that officers are no longer testifying in person. They're testifying remotely by phone.
Yes.
And from a lawyer's side of things and from the Traffic Lawyers Association that I'm the vice president of, we find that to be troubling.
Why?
Because several reasons. Number one, you have a right to confront your accuser.
But you're confronting them via the phone, right?
On a phone.
Right.
So, you know, the right to confrontation may have a face-to-face requirement, and that's an argument that we're making. The other thing that bothers me is that I can't judge credibility or demeanor over the phone.
Okay.
So before COVID, if I asked the officer a question and it raised his eyebrow, officer, what corner were you on? Let me think about that. I'm not sure what corner I was on. You see the wheels turning, but if they're not in front of you, you know, they could. It's a different dynamic.
But so you wouldn't get the same thing over the phone if you would ask the question.
You know what? I just find that there's a lot more ability to. There's an inability to see the demeanor, to see when the officer might be. You're pushing them with this question and it's bothering them.
Gotcha.
You don't see that. You don't see the reaction, so it sort of takes away. And the other issue is just the client. The clients are coming. The clients, while they offered them the option, the clients are still coming to court, and they feel like, well, I'm here. Why can't the officer be here? So in that regard, the association that I'm with has filed a suit against the State Department of Motor Vehicles to try to overturn this process, and we're working on it. We'll see what happens. It's a work in progress. We have a court date in a couple of weeks in Albany, in the Supreme Court in Albany, to argue that, and we'll see how it goes. You know, it's just another wrinkle in the pandemic world that we're in now, and everything is topsy-turvy, and nothing is as it was before. And we hope it'll get back to some semblance of normal, but
right.
Normal is a relative term now. And in my house, we always joke, normal is just a setting on a washing machine. Everything else is life. So there's no such thing as normal. But traffic court in Long Island and upstate has changed a lot also. Those are the courts where we can plea bargain. In the city, there's no plea bargaining. I can't negotiate a ticket down in New York City. All we get is a trial. But in Nassau, Suffolk, upstate, we have the opportunity for plea bargaining. And in a lot of the courts, they've now switched either to a smaller capacity system like the city, and still having their night courts, or they've switched to a virtual system where I've for example, just last week I got a call from the village of Malvern here in Long Island. I had 2 or 3 cases. The prosecutor called me with the judge on the line, and we negotiated a deal. Okay. I feel much more comfortable with that than I do with a hearing. Because in a hearing is testimony on both sides, sworn evidence. Here, it's a negotiated deal, and they send me a stipulation afterwards, and we can do. It's finalized in writing, so it's subject to that final agreement. So it's a formalization to it. Okay. I haven't had any Zoom hearings yet, although that may be coming down the pike. There is some talk that the DMV may be moving to a virtual video hearing system soon. We're waiting to see what their decision is on that. The big court in Nassau County is the Nassau County Traffic Violations Agency on Cooper Street in Hempstead.
On the village,
and they were close. It's in the village of Hempstead, but it's the central court that covers all the unincorporated villages in Long Island, and they just reopened last week.
Has there been any cases that have come, into your office that you said, no, I can't do this?
As I said earlier, my practice is limited to traffic tickets and things that relate to driving, except drunk driving. And I don't generally handle drunk driving cases for several reasons. Number one, because they're very complicated, very technical, a lot of time involved in court. And so I stay away from that for that reason. The other reason is that philosophically, drunk driving is a tough thing to deal with.
Yes.
And my wife's grandfather, as I said, was a traffic court judge. And one of the areas that he used to handle was the chemical test refusal hearings. And those are when somebody refuses to take a breathalyzer test. There are certain hearings that they're entitled to see if the state's going to suspend their license for their refusal. And the one area he refused to handle when he was a DMV judge was those chemical test refusal hearings, because he felt he couldn't be impartial on those. He was so anti-drunk driving that he felt he would not be able to be impartial on those. So his theory rubbed off on me a little bit, and I do have that that bad feeling about drunk driving. And I'll tell you though, in 2016, I was actually a selected juror in Nassau County Court on a drunk driving, resisting arrest, driving while suspended case. 14 days of my life gone. So I learned it from the third side. You're on the law enforcement side, I'm the lawyer side, but I learned about it from being a trial juror, and it was an amazing learning experience, but a terrible personal experience to have to spend 14 days on a case like that.
Yeah,
but
sure.
The judge didn't let me off, and I was there, and I did my civic duty, and I hope to never have to do that again. Right. So drunk driving is really the area that I try to stay away from. I'll take almost every other driving case.
Okay.
I handle accident fatality hearings in New York State. When somebody has a fatal accident or a very serious bodily injury accident, the DMV holds a hearing to see whether or not the actions of the driver contributed to the death of the other individual. And I'm not afraid of those. I'll handle those. They're sad and they're tough sometimes, and you see things that you never want to see when you see videos or diagrams or pictures, and they're tough scenes to see. And I'm sure you've seen your share of the results of a fatal accident. It's not pretty, but you know, those things I'm willing to handle. So drunk driving is really the area that I stay away from.
All right.
Because it's complex, and some personal feelings about it that I feel wouldn't make it appropriate for me to take those on.
I got you. Understand.
So you said that you have some pet peeves about child seatbelts.
Oh yeah, I ride it every time. Every time.
There's no mercy for those, I guess.
Not unless you're rushing that child to the hospital.
Right.
None. Again, I've seen so many accidents. I've seen a lot of children get ejected, from cars. Thankfully, I thank God, I've never seen, a child dying as a result of an accident, but I've seen some very nasty accidents, children been ejected. So I'm going to write that 100% of the time, especially if the parent or the person driving or whoever has their seatbelt on, you couldn't put this, the small child seatbelt on, put them in a child seat, a booster seat, you're getting that summons 100% of the time.
Right.
So
and is there any summons that you feel in your discretion you wouldn't write if you encountered it?
Oh yeah, there's a lot, and I'm a very big summons writer. I've said it many times. I was dubbed, eagle eye, amongst my peers. They'd be like, "How did you see that? That car was, 20 car lengths away. How'd you see that? Oh, eagle eye's at it again." Yeah, I wrote a lot, but I've given more warnings than I've actually written summonses. Right. Believe it or not, a lot more.
Yeah, but that's sometimes it gets more attention from the driver than the summons itself.
Yeah,
you've pointed out to them their mistake or their indiscretion, but you've educated them as opposed to punishing them. I know you said tickets aren't punishment, but people feel their punishment.
Right, and I always tell them, listen, I'm not trying to punish you. I just want you to correct your action. That's it.
Right.
So, is there anything that I did not ask you, Michael?
I think this was a great educational opportunity for your viewers and for my viewers.
Yes.
And we'll cross endorse the.
Absolutely.
So
if you got some time, later on,
we'll do another one. We'll do something topical.
There's a bunch more questions that I have. I don't want to keep you any longer.
Sure. I want to thank you for inviting me, and thank you for your time. And I want your viewers to know that you truly are a man of the community. If they don't know your fire service duties that you handle in your community, and family man, and you a new father for a new baby recently. That's great.
Yes, thank you.
Congratulations on that. So keep up the good work, and thank you for hosting me tonight.
Not a problem, man. You want to tell the viewers how to get in touch with you?
Sure.
It's on the screen.
It's on the screen right across the top.
I'll definitely put it in the comment section below, or in the description box below. I'll put it there.
And I also and my new trafficticketprofessor.com is my new website, but trafficticketlawyer.net is the one that's been around for a couple of years, and educational. I've got blogs up there. I've got videos. I've got podcasts up there, and my YouTube channel, which we'll also link.
Yes, absolutely.
In the comments. All right.
Tell them what that is.
Beer law office. Beer law.
Beer law. All right, man. Mike, listen, I sincerely appreciate you taking.
Thank you, Darnell. My pleasure.
It's definitely a good educational avenue for both sides, and I appreciate it. And again, I hope you'll have some time in the future so we can do this again, man.
Certainly. Good night, and thank you, Darnell.
right.
Good to see you.
Talk to you. All right, guys. That was Michael Beer. I hope you appreciated it. Again, we're gonna put his information down in the description box below. And if you got a traffic summons and you need that traffic attorney to help you out, give him a call by all means. Well, that's it, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video. Until next time, I'll see you in the next video.